Extra, extra, read all about it. Andy Dalton is the Chicago Bears Week 1 starter. The words came out of Matt Nagy's mouth after minicamp practice on Tuesday afternoon. I'm Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, joined by Dionne Miller of ABC 7. Special guests on the program this week, Marc Silverman of ESPN 1000. Sylvie, we got to start with you because you were the one that asked the question that brought the news out. First of all, reaction to the news, and then tell us why you've been so fired up about the topic for weeks.
Yeah, look, and I don't like when talk show hosts send their reporters and say, hey, go ask my question. I've been on the beat before. I'm a big boy. I'm cool with facing the coaches. I think it's more important when you put your face out there. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird circumstances with the way they do it now. Instead of me just shooting up to Hallis Hall from my house, I got to be on a Zoom, and this actually happened during the show. Dan, we've talked a lot about it. And I think you really set the table well 2 years ago when you guys at the Tribune researched what went into the Bears process on picking Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, or Patrick Mahomes. And we found out from that piece that their process was wrong. Even though the result was wrong, their process was wrong. And if their process was right and the result was wrong, we would have less fault to it. So I've been fired up about these reports that Andy Dalton has been promised the job before they knew how their quarterback room would look. And I always have found that they rush to doing things when they don't have to. Rushing to make the Foles trade because, oh, my God, he knows the system. What are we going to do if we don't get Nick Foles? Rushing for Mitch Trubisky. Oh, my God, what if we don't get him at 3? We got to move up and get him at 2. So I didn't understand the process behind the promise. I've been wanting to ask someone in the Bears organization this question. Did you make a promise before you knew if you could draft a rookie quarterback? And that developed into the Collinsworth podcast that came out yesterday where we thought – though there were some people saying he left room to be interpreted and things to happen in training camp. And then I wanted clarification. Is there nothing that Justin Fields can do to win the job? And I'm cool slow playing it. I want my forever quarterback as a Bears fan. That's the ultimate goal here. I just find it a little curious that you announce it and that you don't even give him that 0.5% chance to win it if he does prove he's ready.
Sylvie, I totally agree with you. And the thing that I am concerned about with this is that Matt Nagy's blueprint is, as Dan and I talked about last week, is somehow in Sharpie, right? Like it has to be this way. We have to wait. But if you're seeing Justin Fields be the better quarterback in training camp, I don't think you can do the franchise any justice by holding him back if he's clearly shown he can win the job. And then to hear Nagy say he can't do that at all for week 1. Okay. But don't miss because you've promised something to Andy Dalton. I mean, they also promised Mike Glennon that it was his year. I mean, yawn, that was a swing and a miss. So I feel like they have to leave themselves open to it. And I am fearful that Nagy saw the blueprint work in Kansas City, and he's just so determined to make that same thing happen here.
So I don't think this is as much about a promise to Andy Dalton as it is about a plan that Matt Nagy has to bring Justin Fields along at a rate that allows him to be not rushed. And you just talked about, Sylvie, not wanting things to be rushed. Well, this is a plan that they have set up internally at Hallis Hall between Matt and Ryan to make sure that Justin can come along at his own developmental rate and not have to walk into training camp the last week of July with the pressure of trying to win the starting job in week 1. I tweeted out Wednesday morning that there's been 40 quarterbacks drafted in the first round since 2006. That's the Jay Cutler draft, since we've talked a lot about Jay Cutler on this before. But of those 40 that have been drafted in round 1, only 16 have started in week 1, but 15 more have started before week 10 of their rookie year.
Right.
So my point all along is that Justin Fields is going to start this year. Mm-hmm. Justin Fields is probably going to start this year before November. And the Bears' plan, to me, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it makes sense from a strategic standpoint in terms of setting up clarity and not having that pressure in training camp and allowing him to develop along at his own rate. The thing that I feel like I'm pushing back on a lot with others and folks in the fan base in general is why the ants in the pants. Everyone is sort of in agreement that this season is going to be 8-9, 9-8, and really the only thing that matters is how Justin Fields is playing in late December and January. So just get the ants out of your pants. You're going to see him, and you're going to see him soon, and then everything will be a moot point at that point.
I'm a perennial ants in the pants guy. I have ants in the pants all the time over simple things in my life, so I'm not going to get rid of the ants in the pants. But my question to you, Dan, would be, why give him the benefit of the doubt with his plan? Like, I don't like restrictions I don't want to put a governor on Justin Fields. I get it. This is your plan. You want a slow play. You're announcing to the world that he's got no chance. Did their plan work when they brought in 13 kickers and they created a circus? Did their plan work when he came out of the bye week going into the New Orleans game 2 years ago and they said they would run the ball and he gave up on it after 4 plays? Like, did his plan work when he wants to be the play caller and he has to fire himself? So my point is, he has created the situation where when they go with a plan, there's a lack of trust from the fan base. And what Dionne brought up, I think, is an interesting point. Maybe with the locker room, this is a team that's watched many plans blow up. So if you're a defense and you've been subjected to Trubisky and Foles and everything that's gone on here, and Darnell Mooney, who said the other day on offense that when he saw the ball coming down out of the sky, he was smiling in his route. Like, they know he's the best quarterback and they know he's ready, but because of this plan, they can't go to him. I don't love it.
Dionne, I definitely don't. Sorry, Dan. I definitely don't love it either. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, Nagy hasn't earned that trust. He's swung and missed on so many things. And even like going to Nick Foles the way he did last year, that was a disaster. He's not earned that where like, this is the plan we're going with and we're really excited about it. And then it hasn't worked and how they've recovered from that hasn't looked pretty. And that's why I worry about him putting it out there in the world right now. No one is under the assumption that Justin Fields is going to win the job in June in shorts. And like, that's ridiculous. Right. But if you're already seeing signs that he's better or ready and he's telling you he's getting there, I think you have to be open to it.
But we're not seeing those signs yet. And that's, I guess, my point. And I got a couple roads to take this down, because number one, I think you guys are both correct in stating very firmly that the Bears' plans often do not work. And this was some of my point a couple weeks ago when all the defensive guys didn't show up for OTAs. It was like, listen, Justin Fields is not a cure-all for the number of things that have ailed this organization for 35 years. And we can't just think that drafting a star quarterback at number 11 suddenly makes all those other cracks in the foundation seal up, right, and go away. It doesn't. And so I'm happy that you guys are doing some of this pushback on the Bears and saying, listen, everyone on the outside world, this organization has been in a state of mediocrity for 3 decades. They know how to fail more than they know how to succeed. And so let's not trust their plans just on the face of it. What I would say to your point, Dionne, is that we haven't seen signs that he's ready to start an NFL game yet. What we've seen is a quarterback that the coaching staff tells you right now is having trouble smoothly spitting out play calls in the huddle. And that's a very remedial thing that is just an indicator of how early in the developmental process he truly is right now and how many boxes he needs to check on that checklist to be ready to play an NFL opponent. And so where I subscribe to the Bears plan is that, say we see Justin Fields in week 5 in Las Vegas, right? And he has a month to learn behind Andy Dalton, a month to learn how to study film, a month to learn how to dig into an opposing defense in game week, a month to learn from mistakes and successes on the field without having to deal with the psychological roller coaster that comes with being the guy making the mistakes and successes. Maybe it sets him up for longer term success in his career. And so I'm willing to give them the opportunity to try this out. I understand what you guys are saying. If he shows in training camp that he is heads and shoulders above Andy Dalton, then you have to leave yourself open to that possibility. I also think that the Bears will leave themselves open to that possibility in a Deshaun Watson, Tom Savage type world where if that's the case, well, then maybe they put him in the second half of the season opener. Maybe they start him in week 2. We'll see where it goes. I don't think they're going to hold themselves back as an organization just because they've made this, declaration in June that Andy will be the week 1 starter.
And I would say that if Justin Fields is getting all this right on June 15th, June 16th, then a lot of teams need to look in the mirror and say, why the hell did we pass on him? Why the hell did we? And he may make them say that as well. I'm just saying, as a host and as a fan, I don't expect him to have any of this down on June 15th or 16th. And the only thing I'm contesting is that they give him room, because there is plenty of room to grow into that and not to put a restrictor plate on him.
No question.
I agree with you completely. And I think that his approach right now is right. He's got grasping things as they come. He's trying to learn as he goes. He's all business. He's earning the respect of teammates quickly. I think that's important. I think even this week, mandatory minicamp is important to see how he interacts with these veterans and how he kind of earns their trust as well. I think that we have to also be patient too, as like a media, to understand that this is so early in the process. But I don't like that they would in any way put something in his head that they're holding him back. I don't like that at all.
We will hear from Justin on Thursday afternoon, and I think it's going to be very interesting to hear kind of how he feels about the Bears' plan for him and his comfort level with it and all that goes with it. I do want to ask you guys a question about your level of surprise in the stat I gave you earlier about the 40 first-round quarterbacks and the number that start in, 40% start week 1 right out of the gates, and 15 more out of that 40 list before week 10. And also curious, because we all exchanged texts about this yesterday, in terms of your reaction to the official declaration from Matt Nagy, because I think that opens up a conversation that Dionne may have to referee here, Sylvie, as we go back and forth on that. But I'm just curious, both of your perspectives on those two topics.
Go ahead, Sylvie.
I think there are many ways to skin a cat, and I'm not like, the thing that is the unknown science in developing a quarterback is, did Tom Brady become great because he was brought along slowly and he was picked 199 and there wasn't any pressure and he landed in New England? If he lands with the Bears in the 5th round in that draft, does he not turn out? What if Justin Herbert sits more? Was it better that Herbert came in because of the fluky injury with Tyrod Taylor? Like, I don't think there's a rhyme or reason. Kyler Murray, what they did in Seattle with Russell Wilson coming back early. Lamar Jackson's another good. Like, I think that's going to be a very interesting one to compare Justin Fields to, where I think Lamar Jackson came in game 9 or 10.
Week 11.
Week 11, right. So, I don't know. Cuddy told us, Jay Cutler on the radio show, that he thinks guys need to sit. Now, other guys say, look, I feast on the playing time. I can't learn from sitting. So I think it's interesting. I think it's food for thought, but I don't know if we can connect dots and say that guy worked out because he sat or because he played, knowing whether was he truly great or did he land in the perfect landing spot.
I think the three of us can all agree that had Mitch Trubisky waited longer to start, he still would have been Mitch Trubisky. Like and so I agree with you, Sylvie, that it's not. There's so much personality involved, so many work ethics involved, so many coaches around them involved in these in that reality. What Dan was talking about and how early these guys start. I don't know that you can make some sort of a blanket statement based on that, other than. It's individual cases, right? I mean, that's the best I can come up with.
I told you 40 first-round quarterbacks drafted since 2006. Here are the 8 who had a winning record in their first 10 starts, no matter when those 10 starts came. Vince Young, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, Tim Tebow, Andrew Luck, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Tua Tagovailoa, who was 6-3, didn't even get his 10th start yet. But that is a weird list of quarterbacks who had success out the gates. And it tells you, just your point, Sylvie, that there is no exact formula for this. And you have to kind of have a gut feel within your organization on what works best for the guy we have, because there obviously isn't a formula. I asked Matt Nagy 2 weeks ago, having been in Kansas City in 2017, how he felt that Patrick benefited from learning behind Alex. It obviously didn't impede his growth, right? Patrick Mahomes quickly turned into a league MVP and then a Super Bowl champion. And so you look back on the Chiefs formula and you say, well, that worked out okay, right? And wouldn't Bears fans sign up for that, even if they don't get to see Justin Fields until Christmas? If we promised you he was going to be a league MVP and a Super Bowl champion within 3 years, the city would already be scheduling the parades, right? And so there's that element to it. One of the reasons I asked Matt that question about Mahomes a couple of weeks ago is because they have been setting this up since draft night, that Andy was going to be their week 1 starter. Mm-hmm. So this is where sort of the back and forth comes in on yesterday's news. And I know I'm in the minority on this because I've heard from both of you and I've heard from people on social media and everything else. I thought yesterday was newsy with Matt officially declaring Andy Dalton the starter for week 1 out of the gates, but I didn't find it landmark. And a lot of people seem to have found it landmark, and maybe I'm misguided on this, and I want you guys to talk me through it.
Well, first of all, when Waddle gives me a compliment, it's newsy and maybe landmark. And Waddle said, on the show, and even this, if it wasn't me asking, if it was you asking, if it was Dionne asking, like Matt Nagy he majors in word salad.
No doubt.
He'll throw some lettuce in there. He'll toss the lettuce, and then here's some croutons, and here's some cheese, and don't forget about the tomatoes, and don't forget the cucumbers.
Bacon bits too. He'll throw some
bacon bits. Are great. You have to have bacon bits in any salad or word salad. So and he'll say one thing, but then wait a minute, here's the bacon. So Waddle said yesterday was a watershed moment because he thought he finally answered a question directly. And maybe he was looking for that moment when he could just get it out there and take the pressure off of Dalton, looking over his shoulder, take the pressure off of Justin Fields, knowing that he has to win the job and he can just become a great quarterback. Yep. I get it. But the disconnect, Dionne, as the referee, that Dan and I have had is Dan thinks, and JD even tweeted it, that this was a reiteration. I don't believe Matt Nagy was reiterating anything because I have not known that there's no quarterback derby. He told us, I'll always remember this takeaway quote, is Justin Fields will tell us when he's ready.
Yes.
Now, and that could be August 20th. It may be December 20th, but he will tell us. Mm-hmm. The difference is yesterday the Bears told us.
Yep.
And he won't be ready. And so that's where I think that even if you thought, and even if he hinted, Dalton's the starter, whether that meant to start minicamp, to start training camp, to start preseason game number 1, I don't think there was ever a declaration for game 1 in Los Angeles. No chance for Justin Fields. To me, that's big time news.
I totally agree with you. And that's exactly how I immediately texted Dan. And I was like, did he just say there's no chance that Fields can win the job? And Dan's like, I like it. And I was like, do I? I don't know that I do. I don't know that we've heard that before. So I agree. That was a declaration. That was a clear answer from a guy who says a lot of words to say nothing. So I totally agree with you. That was a big moment. That was a very big moment. And I think that it caught me off guard a little bit because I thought that they were going to wait. And like he had said, wait until Justin shows us that he's ready. And now that's not the case. And it just feels like it felt like someone had already kind of made that promise to Dalton, the way that he was even operating, the things that he was saying, and he even understands why he's here. But at the same time, I feel like somebody asked him if he had been promised that, and he danced around it, right? Other than to say he's the start. I mean, right?
He's the starter.
He's the starter. So I don't know. I mean, they're going to tell us what they want to tell us. It's Zoom. We're not right there to follow up with questions right away. They mute us faster than we can even get our questions out sometimes. So it's hard to tell, but I agree. I thought that was a very big moment.
No question, Dionne. You just brought up something that I wanted to get to exactly next. I will say this. It was definitely a headline. I got on the phone with my colleagues at the Tribune immediately, said, we got to get this up. It's a headline. We need to put it up there. I just questioned the size of the font of the headline because for me, it was an official declaration of something we've been forecasting since the last weekend of April, saying Andy Dalton is going to be the week 1 starter. Andy Dalton's going to be the week 1 starter. The head coach told you the same thing that we've all been telling you. And so it does become news. I've just questioned the size of the font. And that's
Dan, when you forecast something, like say you forecast this big tropical storm and you can forecast it and you forecast it, when the tropical storm arrives, it's still big headline news. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Medium headline. Medium headline.
No. It was like,
no, it's still a headline. It's still the story.
It's cup snake headline. It's long, it's big.
That's where we disagree. But Dionne brings up a good point because I do think this has a lot to do with the Zoom press conference. And I sat last night feeling like we are covering so much less ground covering the football team in the Zoom era, because to your point, Dionne, we don't get follow-up questions. Sometimes you get one question to the head coach per day. And if we were sitting in that room at the PNC Center in Lake Forest, we would have stopped him 3 or 4 times in previous press conferences and said, wait, hold on a second, Matt, while we're having this dialogue rather than a 1-by-1 Zoom, you're on mute, you're not, the conversation would have flowed and we would have said, are you saying that Andy is your starter? When you only have one question per day, you have to make it count for what you're working on that day. And it's inhibitive. And I think it's inhibited all of us about learning more about this football team. And this is the last thing I'm going to close with you guys because I want to get your take on this. Matt has been clear now, particularly yesterday in his answer to your question, Sylvie, that they have a plan, right? He said the word plan multiple times. They have a plan. It is up to the Bears now to articulate that plan and explain to the outside world what that plan is, because they haven't done a good job of it to this point. The messaging has not been out there for the outside world and the fan base that wants to see Justin Fields yesterday as the starting quarterback to understand what this plan is and why it is in place. And I think it's imperative on them for the rest of minicamp, for the start of training camp, to explain to all of us, and it's up to us to ask the questions to get it out of them. What is this plan? And what are the boxes that Justin needs to check before he can be promoted to the starter? But please don't just tell us you have a plan. Please explain it to us so that A, we can understand it, and B, to your point earlier, Sylvia, so we can critique it when it either works or doesn't work. We need to know what the plan is.
That's the number one thing here. Like, a lot of people say, well, they always say to me, Sylvie, that's outcome bias, or that's hindsight. We judge the draft picks by hindsight and outcome bias. It is their job to get it right. Mm-hmm. So if Justin Fields sits 5 games, if he sits 5 minutes, or if he sits the whole year, if he turns into the forever quarterback, I will stand up and cheer their plan. Do you know what I mean? And I gave you a lot of things where I told you their plan hasn't worked. Yeah. The one thing that did work for them is they handled the draft well. You know, I know you made the analogy, Dan, that this was the equivalent of looking down and seeing a $100 bill. But they have been quick to the trigger with many. They could have traded up for 5 or 6 or 7. They played it perfectly, and I'm hoping now this is the start of a hot streak where they also play the development of Justin Fields perfectly.
Yeah, and they didn't. It felt like in this draft they didn't stretch. They made the right moves, and it looked very smart. It felt like, you know, Ryan Pace and his conviction. He's making these picks with conviction, but it didn't feel like he was making these picks out of desperation or feeling like his job was on the line at all. It just kind of flowed very well from like Justin Fields to Tevin Jenkins. Like, it just felt like they were making good moves. But I agree, we need to know what that plan is. I think you can't just say that it's a plan and we're excited about the guys that we have. You have to give us more than that because of the track record. Because of the track record, you have to give this fan base more than that. And I would think the McCaskies are sitting there saying the same thing. Like, okay, well, what is the plan? Like, do we know? Does everybody? I feel like they have a right to ask those questions based on what we've seen over the last couple of years.
It's a terrific discussion, and perhaps the most valuable thing to come out of this is that we need to keep shining the spotlight on their plans and keep the microscope out. Because I thought for a little while there, just the frenzy of excitement of Justin Fields being drafted led a lot of Chicago to back off this aggressive stance that they were in when the 6-game losing streak started through draft weekend, and saying this organization is lost, they're a mess, I'm never spending another dollar on anything that they do. And everyone was suddenly just in this euphoric state. All is forgiven. We got Justin Fields, we're rolling forward. For me, if there's any take that comes out of it, it's let's keep the heat on and let's make sure that the plan they have is designed to work. And if it's not, then they're going to have to answer for that.
Well, so if you have ants in your pants, make it be for questions to the plan, for answers to the plan, please.
Terrific discussion, guys. Sylvie, thank you for joining us. We will definitely have you back at some point. You got something to chime in with?
Well, there was no refereeing necessary, Dionne. I think that was the easiest game you've ever had to referee with your kids, with reporters, with anything in your life.
Dionne's mere presence is a calming influence on the world, and so we were able to have a civil discussion instead of sending obscene gifs each other's way over text last night. So. Awesome. We've solved it. The problem is solved. On we go. Andy Dalton, baby, week 1.